wide receiver 10 by current rookie ADP is Xavier Legette. You mentioned him already. Almost like the opposite prospect of Keon Coleman. The size isn't that much different. Coleman's a couple inches taller. Legette 6'1", 221, but he ran a 4.3. He is blazing fast. He's also already 23 years old. Had a monster season last year at South Carolina, 71 catches, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns. Not many guys that we're talking about today have done what he did in terms of actual production in his last season, but there was very little production before that to bank on. So again, at wide receiver 10 in this class, I know you likely get more than some of the guys we've talked about. Is that about right for him?
Yeah, and I think there's potential for him to push much, much higher. I think for me, he might end up being the guy that's like right after the like stuck in stone, like top guys. You know what I mean? Like Bowers and the quarterbacks, and once they're off the board, it's like Legette. I think he brings really exciting upside. When I try to compare him after like watching him and then digging into how he was winning in his final season, it's like some kind of like Dwayne Bowe player, like Marquez Colston kind of guy. Like he's really good at winning at the catch point, but he's way faster than those guys. And so then who the heck do you compare him to? Like AJ Brown? I don't want to throw out that comparison because to me, AJ Brown is like one of the best receivers we've seen in a very long time. But yeah, he's an absolute freak athletically, and he really backed it up with the production in his final season. And it took him till his 5th season, and that is unusual. There are not very many prospects who have done that and then have been successful. But if you look into, the why, I think that there's a lot of context that makes sense as to why on and off the field it took a long time for Legette to really find his footing. And when he did, like he was unbelievable, unbelievably efficient, drew targets at a high rate. He was winning all over the field. He dominated press coverage. He dominated man coverage, and he was pretty productive against zone coverage as well. I Nothing that I found from his breakout season, his real like true season as a wide receiver one, stood out as fraudulent at all, which has not been the case with somebody like Treylon Burks or someone like that who, has this big production, but like we've got questions about whether he can really play the wide receiver position. And I
Right.
think that's the question with Legette. I'm really curious to get Matt Harmon's full take. I don't think he has his profile on Legette out quite yet, but I have heard him mention that like he's not nearly the type of route runner that some of these other guys are, even like, Brian Thomas potentially. So I think he might still have a ways to go in terms of refining his game. And that is a little concerning because he's already old, right? He's going to be almost 24 by the time the season
I love
starts.
I love the fact that we're talking about these guys. Like, yeah, he's already ancient. But you're right. And that was kind of going to be my next point was like for the most part, when you talk about the profile, when you talk about the advanced stats that you like to look at, when you talk about the size speed combination, this looks like a guy who should not be wide receiver 10.
Right.
The 23 can age 23 can make up for part of that because it is easier to dominate in college football if you're 2 to 3 years older than a lot of the guys you're playing against, and those ages of development in terms of size and speed and strength do matter quite a bit. But what is it just the route running? Is that the other major question mark that's holding down, you think, his ranking?
I think so. And maybe concerns that, like I've already mentioned with a lot of these guys, he's just going to be an X fielder, like stretching receiver that's not going to be that good for fantasy, not going to draw a ton of targets or something like that. I think that could be a concern as well. But I, I think he has the potential to be more than that based off what I found. And like when I say he's dominating, it's truly like elite territory. Like him and only CeeDee Lamb and Devontae Smith and people like that have been this good against press coverage, this good against man coverage, stuff like that. And I think at the very least, he does bring that skill set right away, the deep ball skill set. He's been one of the, like this season was one of the most efficient deep ball seasons we've ever seen from a receiver.
Right. Do you think that like within his profile, it's a possibility that he becomes an NFL team's true number one wide receiver, or is his best case scenario kind of being a really good 1B on a really good pass offense?
It's hard to tell because I feel like his development has come so late in terms of learning the receiver position and really coming into his own as a wide receiver one. And we only have this one season of data on it. For what it's worth, his target rates in this season were just below like AJ Brown. AJ Brown had more target competition. It's I think you could possibly like envision that kind of a role for him in the right offense, in the right setting where like there's not that much target competition and they can kind of ease him into that kind of role, get him some catch and run stuff, and like let him develop his route running and potentially be that guy. But I don't think it's likely. I think that's on the very top of his ranges of outcomes.
I will say, like, in comparing him to Coleman, where we're not even sure how excited we are about taking him in round 2, this sounds like exactly the type of receiver I want to take in round 2 of my rookie draft. The guy that, the floor is not very good, but you shouldn't really care that much about floor in round 2 anyway. And the ceiling's absolutely insane on like a play or game or maybe individual season basis.
Yeah. So like if he goes to the Panthers or something, like if he was in the Mingo role from last year, that like we thought he could maybe get some slot work and some catch and run stuff, and then also be a deep guy, I think he would be way better than Mingo. His target drawing is way above anything we saw from Mingo. But if he goes to like the Chiefs or something like that, where there are already established guys, I don't think he's gonna be relevant for fantasy at all. I think he'll be in the Justin Watson role, and eventually could maybe be more than that, but it's not a. I think it's really going to be context dependent on where he lands if he's going to be on a wide receiver 1 type of track. But that upside, I think, does exist.